you came to Africa as an educated person, as an adult. I think you were married with family, right? So you had lots of life experience. Why did you find there was a big learning curve even in spite of that?
Very big learning curve, because no matter how much North American education and world experience I might have had in other parts of the world, I did not have local knowledge. I did not know how to speak the language. I did not know the culturally appropriate ways to respond and behave. And it takes time to pick up those cues. And I had to be willing to be humble and to be a learner and to be willing to look foolish until I began to realize some of the nuanced ways that I could interact and be culturally appropriate. When we moved to Kenya, where we spent 16 years living as a family and working as global field staff, I wondered, how I would be able to adjust to a totally different culture again. And one of the stories that early on occurred when we had moved to a remote village in Kenya was as I began to learn the language there and interact with the community, I began to realize how the community saw how few skills I had and how little knowledge I had of how to survive and live in that very remote part of the world that has very specific rules and resources for how to function. And you begin to realize that no matter how well educated you are or how much you can function in Japan and in Canada and the United States, I did not know how to function in northeastern Kenya. And it was a very humbling time. And I remember one day it kind of culminated for me. I was working together with a cook as we were preparing together a meal that we would share together with the team that was running a project up in northeastern province. And wanting to practice my Somali language as well as interact with my friend as we were cooking together. We were sitting on the sand and cooking over a charcoal brazier that I did not know how to properly cook a meal over, so I really needed her help and assistance. And I picked up an egg that was beside us, and I wanted to know, was the egg local to our little village? Because most of our produce and food would have had to be brought from a village or a larger center about 3 hours away. And I was just making conversation, and I asked her, does this egg come from our village? What I asked was, where does this egg come from? And wanting to know, in my mind, I wanted to know, does it come from our village or from away?
Right.
And this look came over her face like, this woman is the stupidest woman I have ever met. And she leaned forward and very kindly looked in my eyes and she said, from a chicken. And I realized in that moment, oh my goodness, I must look like no one she's ever seen before. This woman who does not know how to cook, doesn't know how to clean, doesn't know how to wash clothes by hand, does not know how to function in our context. And in that moment, I didn't have enough language to explain to her that I was wondering whether it was an imported egg or whether it was a locally grown egg. And so I just had to say, okay, thank you, and just chalk it up to being willing to humble myself and be a learner.